I'm starting today's video with a story that took place right in the heartland of America. A story that completely transformed the lives of ordinary folks who found themselves caught between everyday routine and an unexpected brush with true heroism. This isn't a work of fiction or a Hollywood script. It's a real-life account that unfolded in a small Midwestern town where neighbors know one another by name and even the quietest person might be hiding an extraordinary secret. Our tale begins with James McAllister, a humble, hard-working man who has dedicated his entire life to running his family farm near the rolling fields of rural Indiana. James never aspired to fame or fortune. Instead, his priorities were simple: honest labor, unwavering devotion to his family, and an abiding love for the land that sustained him. Every morning before dawn, James would rise, the cool pre-dawn air crisp against his skin, and set out to tend to his animals and crops. Whether it was mending fences or checking on the weathered barn, his days were filled with tasks that might seem mundane to an outsider but were, in fact, the lifeblood of the community. His steady, unassuming demeanor and warm, sincere smile brought hope and reassurance to everyone in town, embodying the very spirit of small-town America. Living with James on the sprawling farm was his daughter, Emily McAllister, a bright, resourceful young woman whose life had never hinted at the dramatic twists that were to come. Growing up amidst acres of farmland, Emily learned from an early age the value of responsibility, the beauty of nature, and the importance of tradition. More than just the daughter of a farmer, she was his trusted helper, handling everything from feeding the livestock to harvesting the crops. Her infectious smile had the power to brighten even the cloudiest day, and her knack for solving problems made her indispensable to her father and well-known among her neighbors. In a town where everyone pitched in for one another, Emily's presence was a beacon of optimism. The small community in which James and Emily lived was a picturesque example of rural American life. Weathered yet charming houses lined the quiet streets, and well-kept dirt roads led to endless fields that stretched out to the horizon. In this close-knit community, time seemed to move at a gentler pace. Every local festival, church picnic, and town hall meeting played a part in weaving the fabric of communal life. Neighbors would gather in the town square on warm summer evenings, sharing stories, laughter, and the occasional home-cooked meal. It was in this environment of genuine connection and mutual care that James and Emily carved out their lives, completely unaware that fate was about to append their peaceful existence. Despite the idyllic appearance of life on the McAllister farm, challenges were an inseparable part of every day. James faced his share of hardships, from unpredictable weather patterns that threatened the harvest to the mounting expenses of modernizing the old farm equipment. Each day, he pushed through physical exhaustion and setbacks with a quiet determination, knowing that his work wasn't just for him but for the entire community that relied on his produce and his steady influence. Meanwhile, Emily, though young, understood the weight of these responsibilities. She stepped up time and again to support her father during times of crisis, demonstrating maturity far beyond her years. The daily rhythm of chores, community events, and shared meals might have seemed ordinary, yet within that simplicity lay an undercurrent of resilience and a promise of unity. What no one in the community realized was that beneath James's modest exterior lay secrets that had been guarded for decades. His seemingly predictable routine was a deliberate facade, one that allowed him to lead a double life. Neighbors and acquaintances saw only the dedicated farmer, unaware that behind that unpretentious exterior there was a man whose past and hidden talents could rival the legends of action heroes from the silver screen. As the calm of rural life continued, a storm was gathering on the horizon. A storm that would soon force these secrets into the open and transform the lives of everyone involved. This first chapter isn't merely an introduction to a tale of a botched criminal attack, it's a portrait of genuine American life. It captures the details of everyday existence in a small town, the long sunlit mornings spent in the fields, the familiar faces of neighbors coming together in times of celebration and crisis, and the silent hope that even in the most unremarkable lives, something extraordinary might be waiting to be revealed. In the coming chapters, you'll learn how the collision of everyday routine with unexpected peril led to a revelation that shook the very foundation of this community. But for now, as we get acquainted with James and Emily McAllister and their world of hard work and hidden depths, remember, every great story begins with the ordinary, and every ordinary person may have a secret waiting to change everything. In the quiet town where life moved at a measured pace and every sunrise brought with it the familiar rhythms of farm life and small-town chatter, a darker undercurrent was beginning to take shape, one that many would rather not acknowledge. Beneath the calm veneer of Midwestern existence, forces of desperation and discontent were brewing. In neighborhoods far removed from the bucolic fields and friendly gatherings, a small group of criminals was slowly but surely coming together, driven by a sense of injustice and personal loss that had festered over the years. These men and women, cast aside by a society that had left them behind, were about to set in motion events that would forever alter the peaceful fabric of the community. It all began several weeks before that fateful night when subtle signs of unrest started to ripple through the town. In a rundown section on the outskirts of a nearby city, a place where dilapidated buildings and broken promises were as common as the rust on old metal, an informal gang started to form. This ragtag group was made up of individuals who had once believed in the American dream but had seen it crumble beneath their feet. Each member carried with them a personal narrative of missed opportunities, financial ruin, and a deep-seated resentment toward a system they felt had abandoned them. Their eyes held a mixture of bitterness and resolve, and while their means were modest, their desire for a fast, easy payout burned fiercely within them. At the helm of this gang was a man named Jonathan "Johnny" Reed, a rugged individual in his late 30s whose weather-beaten face bore the marks of a hard life. With a demeanor that oscillated between menacing and magnetic, Johnny possessed an uncanny ability to rally those around him. He was no idealist. What he wanted was simple, immediate gratification in the form of cash, with no regard for the collateral damage left in his wake. His piercing gaze and steely tone were enough to silence dissent among his cohorts, as he meticulously laid out the plan that would soon target a seemingly vulnerable rural homestead. The McAllister farm, with its unguarded gate and isolated location, appeared to him as an easy mark, a perfect opportunity for a quick hit in a town where law enforcement was few and far between after dark. In secret meetings held in abandoned garages and deserted warehouses on the outskirts of the city, Johnny and his crew scrutinized every detail of their intended operation. They pored over maps of the county roads, debated the best times to strike, and analyzed the patterns of life in the rural community. Their strategy was based on exploiting every vulnerability: the low-tech security of a small farm, the isolation of a community where everyone trusted one another, and the natural lull that came when most residents were asleep. They decided that the cover of night would be their ally, a time when silence reigned and the unsuspecting could be caught completely off guard. Under Johnny's careful direction, every detail was scrutinized and every potential misstep planned for. Despite the outward confidence of the gang, cracks began to appear within their ranks. Some members hesitated, questioning whether a life of crime was truly worth the risk or if there was even any honor left in the way they were planning to treat their unsuspecting victims. These doubts, however, were quickly smothered by Johnny's unwavering authority. With a dismissive wave and a reminder that there was no room for weakness in their world, he pushed aside any lingering moral qualms. In his eyes, survival in a harsh world meant that one must be prepared to do whatever it took, no matter how ruthless it might seem. Meanwhile, in the quiet of the McAllister farm and the surrounding town, whispers of unusual activity began to circulate. Locals mentioned seeing unfamiliar faces lurking around the perimeter at night, and odd sounds drifting from the fields and back roads sparked fleeting concerns among the residents. But in a community where everyday hardships and minor inconveniences were part of life, these murmurs were easily dismissed as overactive imaginations or the harmless ramblings of a few overly cautious individuals. No one could have foreseen that these seemingly insignificant details were the precursors to a calculated criminal act that would soon shatter the town's peaceful routine. As the days passed and the plan solidified, the tension within the gang grew palpable. Each member's desire for a quick escape from their troubled lives was mixed with an unspoken anxiety about what might go wrong. Their internal struggles, though hidden behind cold exteriors and rehearsed lines of bravado, lent an unpredictable edge to their planned assault. They were determined to seize a moment of vulnerability, convinced that this one act would finally set them free from the cycle of poverty and despair that had defined their lives. In this chapter of looming threat and rising danger, the collision between the mundane and the menacing was becoming inevitable. The slow encroachment of criminal intent upon a community built on trust and shared values set the stage for an eventual showdown that would force everyone to confront the reality that even in the heart of America's pastoral landscapes, darkness sometimes lurks in the shadows. It was in these final days before the planned attack that fate was quietly aligning itself, setting the stage for a night that would leave an indelible mark on the McAllister family and the community they cherished. It was on a moonless, starless night when the inevitable collision between light and darkness finally unfolded. Under the cloak of midnight, when most of the town's inhabitants were deep in slumber, the criminals set their plan into motion. The silence that blanketed the countryside was abruptly disturbed by the stealthy footsteps of Johnny Reed's crew as they made their way toward the McAllister farm. Moving with deliberate precision and an almost eerie calm, the gang crept closer to their target, fully confident that the isolation and quiet of a small Midwestern farm would render their attack swift and unchallenged. The first signs of intrusion became apparent just as the eastern horizon began to hint at dawn. The criminals had successfully infiltrated the property through an unlocked side gate, a detail that resulted from the long, exhausting day of labor that had left James McAllister too weary to secure every entryway. The darkness inside the house was only broken by the occasional creak of old wood and the soft hum of the wind brushing against the window panes. In one of the upstairs rooms, Emily, who had been asleep in her modest bedroom, was abruptly awakened by an unusual noise. At first, she assumed it was just the wind rustling through the trees, but as the sounds of shuffling footsteps and hushed, urgent voices grew louder, dread began to seep into her heart. Time seemed to slow down as each second stretched into an eternity. The fear that gripped Emily was palpable, a mixture of disbelief and terror that made her heart pound so loudly it seemed she might wake everyone in the house. With trembling hands, she attempted to quietly rise from her bed and find a safe place, desperately hoping to avoid detection. Yet before she could find any refuge, the door to the hallway burst open with a resounding crash. In that instant, the masked intruders flooded into the room, their faces hardened by determination and greed. Their expressions were void of any hesitation, and in their eyes, there was nothing but a cold, calculated desire to seize what they believed was rightfully theirs. Within moments, chaos erupted inside the once peaceful home. The criminals, relying on their superior numbers and rehearsed tactics, quickly overpowered the initial defenses. Their plan was to secure the house and locate anything of value, an objective that, in their eyes, justified every action they took. As Emily cowered in the shadowed corridor, her muffled cries pierced the heavy air, drawing the attention of her father. James McAllister, who had been asleep in a back room after a long day's work, was jolted into action by the unmistakable sound of distress. In a heartbeat, he grabbed the nearest tool, a sturdy, well-worn farming hoe, and rushed toward the commotion with the resolve of a man who had long been prepared to defend his family and livelihood. What followed was a raw and unfiltered confrontation. James's movements were as swift as they were precise. Every swing of his tool was delivered with a force that belied the humble nature of his weapon. The dull thud of the hoe colliding with a criminal's arm and the subsequent grunts of pain filled the room as the intruders momentarily faltered. For a brief moment, the tide of the assault seemed to shift, as the criminals, caught off guard by the ferocity of a man they had underestimated, hesitated in their advance. Emily, watching the unfolding scene from her hiding spot, felt a flicker of hope surge through her, a hope born of the realization that her father was more than just a simple farmer. He was a protector, willing to risk everything to save her. Despite the sudden burst of resistance from James, the criminals quickly regrouped. Johnny Reed barked orders, and the attackers resumed their advance with renewed, albeit frantic, determination. One of the intruders attempted to force his way toward Emily's hiding place, intent on snatching her away before she could even cry out for help. But in a split second, James intercepted the assault, deflecting the attacker's grasp with a powerful instinctive maneuver that sent the criminal reeling. The clash of raw strength against criminal intent echoed throughout the house as each moment became a battle for survival. Every crash, every shouted command, and every cry of pain was a testament to the struggle unfolding within those walls. The air inside the home was thick with adrenaline and terror, a cacophony of desperate resistance that pitted the unyielding love of a father against the cold, calculated brutality of men who had lost their way. As the confrontation escalated, it became clear that the criminals had not anticipated encountering a force as determined and unyielding as James McAllister. His actions, driven by the fierce need to protect his daughter and home, were as unpredictable as they were relentless. Each blow he struck, every parry of an incoming attack, carried the weight of years of suppressed strength and the quiet conviction that nothing could be taken from his family without a fight. Even as the chaos reached its peak, the struggle was not simply a physical one, it was a battle of wills. The criminals, who had entered with the cold efficiency of a well-practiced team, now found themselves rattled by the sheer ferocity of a man they had assumed to be ordinary. In that dimly lit corridor, where every sound seemed amplified by the intensity of the moment, the true nature of the conflict was laid bare. It was a collision between two worlds, one defined by desperation and the other by the unwavering, almost instinctual commitment to protect what is most dear. That night, as the confrontation raged on and the boundaries between predator and protector blurred, the McAllister home became the stage for a dramatic struggle that would forever alter the lives of everyone involved. The fierce determination in James's eyes, the raw emotion in Emily's silent pleas for safety, and the growing uncertainty among the criminals all combined to create a moment of truth. A moment when the ordinary could no longer hide behind pretense, and every participant was forced to confront the cost of their actions. As dawn's first tentative rays began to break through the battered remnants of night, the violent cacophony of struggle slowly gave way to an eerie stillness that hung over the McAllister homestead. In the shattered remnants of what once was a peaceful living room, amid the scattered tools and dented furniture, James McAllister stood motionless, a solitary figure whose presence now commanded an entirely different respect. His heavy breathing and the lingering dust of the fight clung to him as evidence of the violent clash that had upended his world. Yet behind his weathered face, there was a glimmer of something unexpected, a spark of determination and an inscrutable secret that had until that moment remained hidden from everyone, friend and foe alike. In the midst of the chaos, when one of the assailants could no longer mask his astonishment, a voice rang out in a mix of confusion and anger. "Who the hell are you?" The question reverberated against the walls of the damaged house, as if demanding an answer that would clarify the chaos. In response, James took a measured step forward. There was a sudden change in his demeanor, a transformation that was as shocking as it was subtle. The rough, unassuming farmer now moved with a confidence and precision that spoke of a lifetime of training and experience far beyond the simple tasks of tending a field. It was in that moment, as if guided by an inner force, that James removed his well-worn baseball cap, a cap that had shielded him from the sun during long days in the fields, and revealed a visage that carried a striking resemblance to a legendary figure from the annals of American action cinema. The stunned silence that followed was palpable. One of the intruders, his voice quivering in disbelief, managed to gasp, "You're not just a farmer, you're," before the words died in the thick, charged air of the room. With an almost imperceptible exhale, James spoke in a deep, measured tone that resonated with authority and experience. "My name is Sylvester." In that single word, the room was transformed. The name Sylvester, so inextricably linked in the minds of many with a larger-than-life action star, carried with it the weight of a secret identity, a secret that had been guarded for years behind the guise of an unremarkable country life. For those present, including the attackers who had so recently believed they were executing a simple low-risk burglary, this revelation was nothing short of earth-shattering. Here stood a man who, until that moment, had been seen only as a diligent farmer, a reliable pillar of the community. Now, however, it was revealed that behind the unassuming exterior lay the skills, the training, and the experience of a man who had once been a celebrated figure on the big screen, a man known to millions as Sylvester Stallone. In that fateful instant, the balance of power shifted dramatically. The criminals who had entered the homestead with the assumption of an easy conquest now found themselves facing a formidable force, one whose every move exuded the mastery of countless battles fought on and off the screen. Emily, who had been silently witnessing the unfolding drama from her hiding place in the corridor, felt a cascade of conflicting emotions. Shock, relief, and a deep sense of pride surged through her as she watched her father transform before her eyes. The transformation was not merely physical, it was as if every fiber of his being was now aligned with the skills and instincts of an elite fighter. Each deliberate motion, every carefully measured step, bore the unmistakable imprint of a man who had once navigated perilous situations on a global stage. His previously hidden martial prowess was now on full display, and every onlooker could see that the humble farmer was, in fact, a guardian cloaked in an ordinary disguise. As the words "Sylvester Stallone" reverberated through the shattered hallways of the home, a heavy silence fell over the criminals. Their faces, once hardened by the thrill of criminal enterprise, now twisted in expressions of disbelief and dread. Even Johnny Reed, the fearless leader who had orchestrated the entire raid, appeared momentarily stripped of his bravado. In that charged moment, the reality set in. They were confronting not just a man, but a legend whose reputation for tenacity and strength was legendary. The subtle aura of confidence emanating from Sylvester, combined with the controlled ferocity in his every action, left no doubt that his hidden past was as formidable as the roles he had once played on the silver screen. In the ensuing minutes, as the remaining criminals hesitated and began to retreat in a flurry of disoriented fear, Sylvester's actions continued with an almost rhythmic precision. With every carefully executed maneuver, it became clearer that his secret had been kept not out of vanity, but out of a desire to live a life of peace away from the relentless glare of public attention. Yet, when his daughter's life was threatened and his home was violated, that repressed strength emerged, reclaiming its rightful place as the protector of his family and community. Neighbors who had been roused by the sounds of conflict began to gather outside the battered homestead, murmuring amongst themselves about the surreal events they were witnessing. For many, the name Sylvester Stallone had always belonged to the realm of movie posters and television screens, a symbol of daring action and rugged determination. Now, however, it was revealed that this iconic figure was not some distant celebrity, but a man who had chosen to live quietly among them. Emily's eyes shone with a mix of awe and gratitude as she absorbed the truth. Her father, the man she had always known as a kind and gentle farmer, was in fact a living legend, a man whose life experiences extended far beyond the familiar fields and dusty roads of their small town. As the final moments of the confrontation faded into an uneasy calm, the transformation of the night's events became irrevocably clear. What had begun as a routine burglary had turned into an extraordinary revelation that bridged the gap between ordinary rural existence and the mythic realm of Hollywood action. Sylvester Stallone, once hidden beneath the humble guise of James McAllister, had stepped forward not only to defend his home but also to remind everyone that sometimes, even the most unremarkable people harbor secrets that defy expectation. And as he stood there, the morning light gradually washing over the scene, it was evident that nothing would ever be the same again. As the dust of the night's chaos settled and the first warm rays of a new day began to bathe the McAllister farm in a gentle glow, the full magnitude of what had transpired started to become clear. The once chaotic scene, marked by shattered windows, dented doors, and the lingering scent of adrenaline and fear, slowly transformed into a canvas of aftermath, a poignant reminder that even the darkest nights yield to the light of a new dawn. Neighbors, drawn by the echoes of the night's violence, began to converge upon the property. Their hushed voices and somber expressions conveyed a collective relief that justice had been served, even as they grappled with the profound shock of what they had witnessed. In the days that followed, law enforcement swiftly rounded up the surviving members of the criminal gang. The ensuing investigations and court proceedings were carried out with an unwavering commitment to upholding the rule of law, a principle deeply embedded in the American judicial tradition. Each member of the gang was eventually brought to trial, and in a series of painstaking hearings that were closely followed by the local media, the community was reassured that the scales of justice would not be tipped in favor of those who sought to prey upon the innocent. The public trial served not only as a deterrent to future criminal activity but also as a reaffirmation of the values that bound this small town together: trust, responsibility, and an unyielding belief in the power of community. At the center of this whirlwind of events was Sylvester Stallone, the man who had managed to conceal a formidable legacy behind the humble guise of a local farmer. Once the secret of his true identity had been revealed during that fateful confrontation, the narrative of his life took on an entirely new dimension. In interviews with local newspapers and televised segments on regional news, Sylvester spoke candidly about the path that had led him from the bright lights of Hollywood to the tranquil, yet sometimes turbulent, life on the farm. He explained that his choice to adopt a quiet rural existence was driven by a desire for normalcy, a chance to leave behind the relentless demands of fame and simply enjoy the beauty of everyday life. Yet, as his calm explanation unfolded, it was clear that beneath the serene surface lay a warrior spirit that could not be quenched when his family was imperiled. The impact of that night rippled far beyond the walls of the McAllister home. The community, once lulled into complacency by the steady rhythms of farm life, experienced a profound transformation. Town meetings were convened to discuss how best to bolster security and ensure that every resident felt safe in their own home. Neighbors who had long trusted in the simple unspoken bonds of rural life began to organize neighborhood watch groups and community patrols. The spirit of togetherness that had always defined this small town was reinvigorated, now strengthened by the shared experience of having faced an existential threat. People talked openly about the lessons they had learned, that vigilance is essential, that no one is ever too ordinary to be called upon in times of crisis, and that even the most unassuming lives can conceal extraordinary depths. For Emily McAllister, the emotional scars of that night were deep but slowly healing, thanks in no small part to the unwavering support of her father and the community at large. In the weeks and months that followed, she emerged not as a victim defined solely by trauma, but as a young woman emboldened by the strength and resilience demonstrated by her father. Emily became a vocal advocate for improved safety measures in the community, speaking at local gatherings and using her personal story to inspire others to stand up against injustice. Her transformation from a frightened teenager to an empowered young adult was a testament to the enduring power of hope and the importance of never losing faith, even in the darkest hours. As the community began to rebuild and the echoes of that fateful night faded into memory, a broader conversation took shape, a conversation about the true nature of heroism, the complexity of human identity, and the moral responsibilities that bind us all together. Public debates and opinion pieces in local papers questioned what it truly meant to be a hero in today's world. Many argued that heroism was not solely the domain of those celebrated on movie screens, but something that lived within each individual willing to stand up for what is right. In this light, Sylvester Stallone's revelation transcended the spectacle of celebrity. It became a living metaphor for the hidden potential that exists in all of us, urging us to recognize that greatness can be found in the most unexpected places. Ultimately, the story of that turbulent night on the McAllister farm became more than a mere chronicle of criminal misadventure and brutal confrontation. It evolved into a modern parable, a reminder that beneath the surface of everyday life, the capacity for courage, sacrifice, and transformation lies dormant until destiny calls upon it. The moral of the story was clear. True strength is not measured by fame or fortune, but by one's willingness to protect the people you love, to face adversity head-on, and to uphold the values that define the community. In a world that often seems overwhelmed by cynicism and despair, the legacy of Sylvester Stallone, both the man and the myth, served as a beacon of hope, inspiring not only his own community but all those who dare to believe in the power of the human spirit. And so, in the aftermath of violence and revelation, as the town slowly returned to its quiet rhythm, the McAllister family emerged stronger and more united than ever. The scars of that night would remain as reminders of both the fragility and resilience of life, and the moral lessons learned would be passed down through generations as a testament to the enduring truth that sometimes, the most remarkable heroes are hidden behind the simplest of facades.